What's up, Team Fearless? You are back at it with me on another episode of the Fearless Investor Podcast. Kyle Stanley coming to you talking about short-term rentals, everything short-term rentals. And if you have not already subscribed to our YouTube channel and to the podcast and left a review, especially on the podcast, then please just take a minute, press pause, scroll down, go ahead and do that, whether you're on YouTube or on the podcast. Subscribe and leave either a comment or a review. That helps out tremendously. You have no idea how much that helps. Every comment, every review helps a ton. So please do that. I'm really excited about this conversation today, and I'm extremely excited about it for you listening on recording right now, because this was to date the most engaging live call that we had in the six-figure formula, which, by the way, if you're not a part of, you just missed out on a ton of opportunities to ask Hailame Kinikini for his knowledge on creative financing, short-term rentals. He has bought over 40 in the last 8 months. We're going to get to his story in a second, but you can go ahead and look at what you get in the six-figure formula by going to fearlesskyle.com/6FF. All of our members in this group get to listen to this podcast live before it ever goes live on our platforms, but they get to actually listen to it live and ask Hailame and ask all of our guests questions, so that you're an active listener of the podcast rather than a passive listener of the podcast. You get to engage with all of our guests, and that is a true benefit of being a part of the six-figure formula. So go check it out. Again, fearlesskyle.com/6FF. Now, with Lame, a lot of you probably remember he was on our podcast about a year ago as one of the most amazing success stories of all of our students in the six-figure formula. Had got 50 properties co-hosting an arbitrage within the first 5 months of being in the short-term rental game, and was already grossing over $1 million in short-term rentals in under a year. It was amazing to see, and you didn't think that he could outdo that performance, but he did. And in the last 8 months now, he's gone and he's purchased over 40 properties with other people's money, and without doing it through the traditional ways of going through a bank and having to get a loan and getting a high interest loan. Because of the way that real estate is going, he's gone in and he's still getting loans at 3.5%, 4.2%, and with almost no money down or none of his own money. And this is a strategy that has completely changed his life, completely changed his net worth, and he's helping people and helping his community along the way as well. That's the greatest thing about this, is that it's not one person wins and the other person loses. Everyone's winning in these deals, and he's going to break that down for you right now here on the Fearless Investor Podcast. Guys, welcome into another episode of the Fearless Investor Podcast, and we are going live in our six-figure formula group as usual. And I have a feeling that the comments and the questions are going to blow up today, because we have someone that has been needing to get back on my podcast for a long time now. Hailame Kinikini, goes by Lame. We're going to keep it simple there with the nickname. Lame, bro, you are, and first of all, just backstory for everyone. If you haven't seen the episode with Lame that we did last year, one of our most popular episodes to date, Lame got to 50 properties using the arbitrage model and some co-hosting in only 5 months. And he has moved in this business incredibly fast, and he and I have become very good friends. And when he told me that he's bought now 40 plus STRs in just the last 8 months, I was like, we have to give an update to everyone here. So, Lame, what's up, brother? Excited to have you on, man.
Hey, super stoked to be here. Thanks for having me back.
So, really quick, man, just like kind of overview, catch people up since you've been on the episode or since you were on the podcast. At that point, you were kind of starting to buy some properties, I feel like, but now you're like, that's all you're doing. And I want people to just kind of hear from the horse's mouth what you've been up to.
Yeah. So to kind of recap, I remember the last time we spoke. I was heavy in arbitrage and co-host, and that was like kind of our model. I moved quickly, and I attribute a lot of that to kind of my background in sales, as I've shared with you. And among kind of other strategies I implemented in finding certain people and knowing how to close them and knowing how to communicate and speak their language. And this was almost 2 years ago now. It was about 18 months ago. And as we all know, in the last 18 months, real estate has shifted hard.
Very much.
And that was kind of an eye opener for me when I started to do these arbitrage, when I started to do these co-hosts. I started losing co-hosts. I started losing people to the market, to the economy, people getting scared. And so I decided at that point that I needed to pivot. And that's really when I started to kind of ask myself, okay, how can we remain profitable and relevant and take advantage of the market as it sits today? And that's when we really started to shift into creative finance. And so to kind of give people an overlay of creative finance, most people are familiar with traditional financing, going and qualifying for a loan through a bank, and then you're getting a mortgage, you go buy property. We also know that there's a lot of cons to that. You got to have income, you got to have credit, you got to have seasoned money, all this crap, and there's a bunch of red tape. What people aren't aware of is that there's this whole other world, this whole other means of acquisition under the creative finance umbrella. There's seller finance, there's subject to, there's MLOs, contract for deeds. And these are other means of acquisition that you can buy a property, you can get ownership, you get title, you get deed in exchange for creating a note that is between you and the seller directly. So you're kind of cutting out the whole mortgage and traditional route that we all are familiar with. And the benefits to it is you don't need credit. You don't need, in some cases, you don't need a lot of money or your own money. And you can quite literally close in 24 to 48 hours, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what we've done heavily. Our exit strategy, we're going into these purchases, these acquisitions, with the strategy 100% of always being short-term rental. And when you can do that and you can kind of combine those two worlds, you start to be in a very niche space, which is creative acquisitions into short-term rentals. And that's more or less what we do now. Is I'm strictly, I'd say the more accurate definition of my company, it was property management and has since evolved into an investment real estate company.
So a lot of stuff there. And I want to first of all just back up really quick to give everyone a real foundational idea. And guys, if you want to really dive into like what is creative financing, we have a couple episodes with Chris Prefontaine and Zach Beach on our podcast and YouTube channel. So like if you want that deep dive on what this is, please go there. But I want to just get a foundational idea of what it is and then dive a little bit more into like the deals that you've been doing and how you're getting them.
Cool.
So yeah, just like break down one deal of, let's say, subject to, and one deal of owner finance, just so people kind of understand what the majority of these deals look like.
Yeah, love it. So I'll share with you a deal that we just purchased last month. This was $1 million property in a destination area here in Utah. And the property was owned free and clear by the developer. So the developer actually built a community of homes, and he was the lender on them. It was his money going into these builds. And as we know, in the last 18 months, the market shifted. He can't dispo it. He can't sell it.
Yeah.
And so,
and this is just so everyone knows, Salt Lake City, that's where you're doing all of these, right?
Yeah. So this one particular is called, it's in St. George. So it's southern Utah, but everything I buy is in Utah. We have some properties elsewhere, but majority in my backyard, which is Utah.
Cool.
And so I approached this developer, and I actually ended up purchasing 4 properties from him. But I approached him. He owns the property free and clear because it's his money that was leveraged to be able to build the property. It's brand new build. And so I approached him and I said, hey, look, I know you're not moving this property, so let me step in and let me buy it from you creatively. Let me make you the bank, and we'll come up with a note between the two of us that makes sense. Right.
And you could do that because he owned it free and clear, because there was no bank involved essentially at this point.
Correct. Yeah. Yep. And so basically we just create a note. It's the same note that you would create in the event if you had Wells Fargo on it or someone else. But because he owns it free and clear, he is now the bank, right? And so the note that we came up with was I was going to give him 75 grand down on $1 million property. So that is less than 10%, right? If you're buying it traditionally, you're putting 20% down just to acquire it.
Yeah.
Right? So there's a huge win there. The second term that was very, very good for us was we were getting an interest rate at 4.5%.
Which is crazy right now.
Yeah.
in today's world.
Mm-hmm. And so this one's incredible interest rate. If I were to buy this traditionally, you're at 6.5 if
Yeah.
everything's perfect, right? And so I'm able to buy it at 4.5% interest rate, less than, I think it ended up being like 7% down total.
Wow.
And then in these deals, the way that you make it make sense for the seller is there's a time frame at which you actually will go and get traditional financing on. And so we call it a balloon payment. So which is 5 years. Okay. So for this one, in 5 years, I'm going to then go and get a traditional mortgage in place, and I'm going to buy him out of the remainder of what's owed to him based on the purchase price we agreed on.
And yeah, and so that's the key thing right there. You're identifying the purchase price up front, not the purchase price of what it would be 5 years down the road.
Correct.
So I think that's important for people to understand, because that took me a minute to kind of wrap my brain around when I first got into these. And, I've done 5% of the creative finance deals that you've done, but I have a little bit of a foundational idea, because when, for me, like someone, even like for you, Lame, you've got someone that has a real big need. I'm not selling this property. It's not moving. I don't know what to do. But even if they were in a position of saying, hey, I'm getting offers, why would I want to talk to you? Well, if we identify that purchase price 5 years down the road, they're getting their down payment, they're getting a monthly interest rate, and they're getting an inflated purchase price 5 years down the road. And when you look at those numbers, it's a win for the seller too, because instead of them getting, let's just say 400,000 now with interest and the down payment, and let's say you purchased it at 450, they're probably going to make like 550 after 5 years. So they're going to make a lot more money with that interest and principal payments as well. So that was something that when I understood that, I was like, oh, I can talk to anyone about this. They don't have to be in a really bad situation. They just have to be able to be in a position of, hey, I can wait for the money 5 years from now and look at this as an investment, instead of just, hey, I need to get it off my plate.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Cool.
And that's where, if you can communicate effectively the pros and the cons of these deals to people, it just makes a lot of sense. It's crazy how much sense it makes for the seller,
Mm-hmm.
and at the same time the buyer, i.e. me, because I know how to short-term rental, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that's really our ace in our pocket for everybody that's in the 6FF. You guys have in your back pocket a skill set that allows us to cash flow more and buy more of these deals and have it make more sense, because we understand how to make the property make money, generate money. So
Speaking of 6FF, hey, 6FFers that are listening to this right now live, like, is this resonating with you? Because I'm seeing questions. We're going to stay on live afterward for this. Now, for those of you out there listening to the recording, I just want you to really, if that didn't make sense, rewind it, listen back to it, because this is really important stuff. So that was owner finance.
correct.
Now let's look at a subject two, because that's a
Okay.
whole different animal.
Okay. So I just finished up with a duplex that I ended up renovating, and I'll kind of go through the details with you. Subject 2 is short for I, as a buyer, am subject to the existing finance on the home. Okay. So I found this young lady who had bought a property less than a year ago, and there were two major problems that she had. One, the property needed some work, and she didn't have as much money or time as she needed to be able to get it up and running, to get it to become a profitable piece of real estate.
So it was an investment for her.
Yeah, it was an investment for her. It was a duplex. Okay. But because it was run down, she was getting kind of those, lower class renters, and there was a lot of problems with the property. She kept having to feed more and more money into it. The second problem was she hated being a landlord. She hated solving people's problems as a manager, right? And a landlord. So I was able to solve those two problems in this acquisition. Okay, with it being a kind of a rundown property, it needed an injection of money to get it up to code. I proposed to her a subject to deal, where I would come in and I would take over the payments. Okay. There's a very strong distinction between me taking over the payments versus the loan. And a lot of people get that mixed up. In a subject to deal, I am not taking over the loan. I am simply taking over the payments.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm taking over her payments. The benefit to me is her interest rate was 4.25%. Okay. So I'm
So
taking,
pause just for a second, because I want to
yep,
make sure people understand that you said you're not taking over the loan, you're taking over the payments, meaning the loan is staying in her name. You're just now paying it from Lame LLC bank account, not her bank account.
absolutely. And so on the loan provider, my credit card's on there. It's coming from my account. I'm the one that's taking over the payments and making the payments. However, the loan is still in her name, right? And so that's a subject to purchase. The benefit to me, again, is that interest rate is 4.25%. Okay. The benefit to her is she no longer has this liability. She no longer is paying this mortgage. Okay.
Now,
Now,
talk me through that just for a second, because devil's advocate says, but the loan is still in her name. So how is that not a liability for her?
really good question. And so there's a few things as a seller and a buyer that you need to be aware of. When you're doing a subject to purchase, as a seller, you really need to make sure and have your ducks in a row that whoever is making the payment is a credible buyer. Okay. And you need to trust that they're going to be able to make the payment, because if they don't, it defaults and it's on you, right? Like it's on your credit, right? And so there's a few ways to protect yourself. There's a deed of trust, which essentially is a note. It's a deed that gives ownership back to the seller in the event that I, as the buyer, do not make the mortgage. And you can do that far before it even defaults. You can do that in 30 days. You can do that in 60 days. For me, because everything's on auto pay, I just have in there 45 days.
Yep.
Like if I don't make a payment in 45 days, they get ownership back. And that's well before there may be a late payment, but that's well before any bank is even considering foreclosure, right? But even in my world, that's just, I'm going to pay it well before then. But we have that in place to protect the seller, to let them know that, hey, even though I'm taking over the payments and your credit is at risk, we have this deed that's in trust that gets you the property back, freeing like you just get it ownership back as is. It goes back to your name immediately on the 46th day that I do not make the payment, right?
Okay. So recapping really quick, we're taking over the payment. This is a situation for this duplex. She didn't have the money to do some renovations. She hated being a landlord. She now has a piece of property that looks more like a liability than an asset to her. You're taking over the payments. The reason that she would do this is because if you ever default, she now owns it back again. But
Yep.
now the next objection is, well, what if you take it over and property's at a 8 out of 10 condition, but when I get it back, it's 6 out of 10. And then now I have more work. And so how do you talk through that?
Yeah, and really that's, that comes down to rapport and trust in your credibility and in your brand, right? Because at the end of the day, that's a risk that anybody's going to take. You don't know, right? As a seller, you don't know, right? If that's ever going to happen, and that's the risk. And so a lot of these transactions are really about relationships and credibility and being able to communicate effectively your strategy and what you plan to do. That's another thing where our space, everybody in 6FF, our space is a comforting tool in these negotiations, because in me communicating to her, I'm telling her exactly my plan.
Yeah.
And that is, I'm going to renovate it. I'm going to improve the property right away. But then two, me paying the mortgage is the last of my worries, because I don't make money at paying the mortgage, right? And so I'm communicating to her, look, I'm incentivized the right way in this model, because for me to make money, I need to make excess of what I'm paying you.
Yeah.
Right. I need to make excess of what the mortgage is. And by the way, I'm also paying her on top of the mortgage $500 a month.
Okay.
So that's
she's getting extra
residual. Correct.
Cash flow. Yeah.
She's getting true passive income without being a landlord. And we kind of came to that agreement as we solved their problems. And my take also, in addition to, okay, I'm going to take over this property, I'm going to put money into it, I'm going to give you a $500 a month residual. I paid zero down for this property, paid
Oh,
nothing to get it.
that's amazing.
Yeah. And so, and
And
go ahead.
And to just add to what you're talking about here with being transparent with the plan, I reached out to you about a deal that I was trying to structure, and I got that same question. Like, hey, we're going to purchase this. The property at the time was worth like 375, and we were doing a 7-year balloon. And I said, how about 425? He said, well, like worst case scenario, what if the market crashes and it's not worth 425? And I said two things. I said, well, one, we can just push out the balloon payment. You can keep on collecting those checks. Or number two is, by the way, my plan with this is to turn that garage and permit it into another unit, which is already going to add about $50,000 to the property. So as soon as I buy it from you at 425, it's going to be worth 425 at that moment. Not 5 years, 7 years down the road. So I totally agree. I think you have to be transparent so that they see, hey, okay, this guy is adding value and this is a safe, really, because it is an investment for them too. If you look at it that way, it's an investment for them as well.
Yep, exactly. And so, in a lot of this, I think people approach this oftentimes the wrong way. A lot of people go into this trying to solve problems with numbers. And although that at the end of the day, when you write up the deal, that's what it looks like. But these deals, I'm telling you guys, these deals are all about solving problems emotionally.
Yes.
Like being able to communicate effectively. Look, this is how I'm going to help you. These are my credentials. This is why you can trust me. And this is the plan that you can put your trust in so that we can solve your immediate problems that you have right now. Right. And that's all it is. And then really that's when you can kind of boil down into what the numbers actually look like.
So either way, whether we're owner financing or subject to him, we're still negotiating a down payment. It could be nothing. It could be something, but the real benefit is it's likely going to be less than 20%, which is better financing than what you get at the bank. You're still going to negotiate the monthly payments. It might just be taking over the payments, or it might be taking over payments plus a little bit more, or in an owner financing situation, just what do they need?
Correct.
And am I correct? Both at some point are going to have a balloon payment, or does the subject to not have a balloon payment?
So again, that's a negotiable piece. Both of them could or couldn't, right? On either side. For this one, the balloon was a lot further out. I think it was about 15 years. And so this one was a long one, but there's some sub 2 notes where, the seller's just willing to write out the entire note. Right.
That's awesome.
So
those are 3 negotiating pieces. Is there anything else that you're negotiating from a number standpoint?
Yeah, without diving into the weeds, and I'll try and simplify this as possible. Apart from that is the amortization scale.
Yeah.
And all that is, guys, is how long the loan is. Traditionally, most loans are 30 years. But in an amortization scale of 40 years, you can spread out, you can add 10 years to make the payment lower, right?
Yeah.
You may be paying more interest heavy on the front end, and you got to be aware of that. But if you're all about the cash flow, sometimes I can go in and spread that loan out to, 40, 50. Pace Morby, he's he's huge stud. He's the king of seller finance sub 2. He just closed a big old note on like a 60-year amortization scale.
Jeez.
Right? So that's another one to try and make the numbers work. You can kind of spread that out. And then the other one, I know there's 5. I'm trying to think. So we got down payment.
While you're thinking of that, let me ask you a question. So like the amortization scale, which I don't know why they make that such a hard word to say.
Every time I say it, I don't know if I'm saying it right.
Yeah. Anytime you talk to a loan officer, they're always like with a 5-year arm, and I like arm better than amortization.
Yeah. No kidding.
So with the amortization schedule, I feel like if I'm going to start negotiating that's probably someone a little bit more sophisticated in the loan and investing process, rather than maybe someone who's just selling their house that they've lived in for the last 20 years.
Correct. And I'd say the more deals that you close in creative finance are going to be directly related to your ability to educate your sellers on these terms, right? In a very simple way. right? Because if you're confusing people and you're over explaining, it'll hurt you.
Yeah.
But there's a very simple way to kind of explain these to every seller to help them understand. And in an amortization scale, the simple answer is, hey, you're going to get more interest up front, but it is going to be a lower payment for me. That's the give and take. That's it in simple language.
Yeah.
Right? So,
Well, and I think you just said the perfect thing for us to segue. Developing this relationship with a potential seller, and you mentioned the word educating, solving problems, right? Like
yep.
let's just from a actual case study standpoint, give me like one person that you maybe the shields were up, they didn't want to talk to you, or maybe they were like, I might be open to this, but not really. And you were able to develop the relationship to lower the shields, and how you educated them, and just kind of put me in the shoes of that person right now. Help me feel what that felt like.
Yeah, really good question. Let's just take this duplex, for example. Okay. The seller on this duplex. Um, the way that I actually had met her and the way that I had approached her is she had reached out to get an idea of what it would look like if she Airbnb'd her duplex. Right.
Okay.
And so there was a relationship there already, at least an interest in my space that helped. And I think that's important because most sellers you come across, they're interested in short-term rentals. They're interested
Okay.
really in anything that's going to create an income that's going to solve their problem, right?
Sure. Sure.
And I don't think we leverage that enough in terms of like just giving people options. Because really, my options initially to her were twofold: arbitrage, and we'll run the numbers to see if that makes sense for me, or co-host, and we'll run the numbers and make sure if that makes sense for her.
Okay.
And then going and diving down those routes, we started to really see that, hey, this property needs a lot of work. It's going to be hard if we do it. It's going to be hard for either, right? Which then allowed us to then go into, well, what if I bought this from you? What if I bought this from you? Now I can't buy it traditionally because, as you know, right, this property is depreciated over the last 18 months because of real estate, and it needs a lot of work. So you're probably not going to get what you want for it.
Right.
But I can solve an issue creatively, right? And I think that giving options is always, for me, it's served as a very like hands-off approach, not salesy at all, very like, hey, I'm just trying to help. I think that's a huge strategy in earning and building trust with these. And it can go with anybody, right? If you're approaching a seller that's had it on for 90 days, the house has been on MLS for 90 days, hasn't sold. I'm approaching them as a means of options. Like, hey, have you considered running this as a short-term rental? Let me run some free comps for you. Right. And then once we go past that and we say, okay, maybe it's not going to work. Well, what if I bought it creatively? Right. And me giving these options is it's just a much more, I think, humanistic way of approaching a problem that lets them feel like, hey, he's really trying to just find a solution for me. Right.
Yeah, I love this. So, I mean, what I'm hearing is the more tools that you have in your tool belt to be able to solve problems, the more likely you're going to be able to, instead of saying, hey, sell me your property, it's, hey, let me solve your problem. Oh, by the way, one of the things I can do to solve your problem is potentially buy your property, but let's look at all these other routes as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And everybody in this group has one key tool, and that's short-term rental. And it just so happens that everybody loves that tool. Every seller loves that tool. So,
and I love this conversation because we have a brand new client in our portfolio that we're managing for, and he has a cash issue. And so even getting the $10,000 to get this property up and running was like a stress for him, that we've now had to put him on a payment plan. And he's like, I'm gonna make a decision in December if I'm keeping this or not. I said, well, if you decide to sell it, make me the first phone call, because I want to have a discussion with you on buying this property. Which, by the way, this property to date has gotten the biggest nightly rate on one stay in Fresno, which was $530. We've never had that happen in Fresno.
let's
The
go.
highest before that was $350. So like almost doubling it. And but the thing I love about what you said is I've experienced that. I've experienced that. Like, if you just come in and you solve someone's problem, his immediate problem was, I need to cash flow. Well, even though he's cash flowing now, he's still stressed about this property. So he might have a bigger problem that I can solve in 3 to 4 months. And I'll keep you in the loop on that. So what when you say though, like the education side of it, right? And that's part of the relationship building. I can tell you it's been really tough to have those conversations because for me, I'm like, man, I haven't like done the numbers yet. I don't know what my offer would be. And like just like in short-term rentals, when I first got into it, I'm like, yeah, I don't know how this works or this works. And so, you're 50 deals in or more right now on doing this. So some of this stuff like the back of your hand. Take me back to like the first or second deal when you were just like, I don't know what to say right now and I'm fumbling and what that sounded like and how you might have done that differently now with what you know. Did you pause? Did I lose you? I think we lost Lame here for a second. Guys, can you out there hear me? Drop a comment if you can hear me. Is it my internet or Lame's? Okay, we're gonna wait for Lame to jump back on here. Okay, that's good to know. Thanks for letting me know, guys. We'll wait for Lame to jump back on. Are you guys loving this? I'm seeing some questions. So we'll definitely answer your questions here after we are done with this. I need to move my dog too. He is going crazy over here. It's a cat. It's a cat. Thank you. Go. I'm gonna. Yeah, and my computer just shut off. I have no idea why. Resetting now. Okay, you are good. Joel, every video that we do is going to be in the archives. In fact, good time just while we're waiting for Lame for me to show you guys because I get this question a lot. Present, share screen, Facebook, share. Okay, so if you go to media and then you go to videos, all of these videos are saved. So you can always go back and watch it. Plus, I also publish these to our podcast, except for the Q&As. We don't publish those to the podcast, obviously. I want to give you guys a little bit more. Oh, here we go. Lame is back on, so we'll just go ahead and jump back into it.
Hey, sorry guys, my computer just shut down.
All good. I was asking people how they're feeling about this in the meantime, and everyone is saying that they're loving this information. So, all right. So let's regroup. I'm just going to ask that question again. We'll restart from that question. Okay. So, from an education standpoint, like going back to your first or second deal, maybe when you were like, I don't know all the right things to say, and I think about it from my standpoint of like when I first started doing this too, and I've struggled still to find a deal because I do think that there is just a lot of conversations to have to learn from like what's the right things to say, what's the wrong things to say, what's oversharing, what's not enough information. And so I think let's look back at that like first conversation and what were all the things that you did wrong? Take us through that and then how that would be different today if you were to go back to that first conversation, no matter if it was a yes or a no.
Yeah, really good question. So I think really the conversations that I had started before it was just me pitching, right? It started before even my personal, and that came by way of conversations with Rochelle Jarvis, who is, as we know, one of the queen bees in California of creative finance. Strat, right? In that mastermind group. Some of my local buddies here that were buying creative, Alec Burbage, all the like, just being able to surround yourself with guys that are actively doing it and then running by scenarios with them of like, hey, what would you say? What would you do in this scenario? What would this look like? I think there's a lot of preparation that takes place before you even start to make those first calls and those first initial ones, to be able to like just see how people think in this world.
Yeah.
And then once you kind of put your, your feet to the pavement and you really start having those conversations, it really fills out the other 50%. So I
Yeah.
think it's those two like it's those key two pieces of educating myself, having open conversations with people that know, and then going out and gaining the experience.
Yeah.
That's really what helped me develop the education to be able to have those first deals. And I'll be honest too, a lot of my experience in my door-to-door industry.
Right.
I was born and bred in the door-to-door industry. I used to sell security systems and run teams selling security systems door-to-door. That helped me a lot in navigating these conversations. But it was really a combination of those things that helped me lead up to my very first deal. And it was a lot. It was a lot of fails, right? Like I remember in our previous podcast, you remember when I was like, man, I felt like I was on fire. I felt like nobody was saying yes to or no to me. But then when
Right.
I started preparing for that presentation, I started to go through all of my old messages, and I was like, I got like 30 no's before I got my first yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Crazy, right?
the mindset was just like, hey, I'm going until I get my yes. And it's crazy how, one success, a million failures are forgotten.
Yeah.
That's kind of the mindset you have to have going into this. But a lot of pre-education, talking with experts, understanding the game yourself, and then experience coupled with experience is really what helped me.
And
So.
just for context, for those that are listening here in the 6FF community, Rochelle Jarvis is a transaction coordinator. She is the best transaction coordinator in the business when it comes to these deals. And having a transaction coordinator on your side is not just a service that's being provided to help you close the deal. It's also someone that has way more knowledge. It's almost like having a mentor along the way as well. And so for those that are in the 6FF community, if you're ever getting to a point where you're like, I want to do creative financing and I want to do a deal, or I've got a potential deal, hit me up, DM me, and I can get you connected with Rochelle because she is the best in the business. Lame, let's transition now, because the whole, purchase, or the whole title of this is how you purchased 40 plus properties in 8 months with other people's money.
Yep.
How are you now? Of course, when you 0% down, like you don't have to go raise money for that unless you're renovating or adding some furniture. But what about these ones that need, the down payments or need a little bit of renovations, need 50, 60, 70K? How are we doing that?
So there is a huge opportunity, and I'll tell this right now to everybody that's listening. And I say this all the time, and I feel like this is like $1 million piece of advice just because it's worked wonders for me. There's a huge opportunity in the retail side of raising funds, crowdfunding. Okay. What I mean by that is there's two bodies in crowdfunding, in grabbing pools of people's money and utilizing them for investments. There's the normal investment funds that we're aware of, and usually it's accredited investors, which is people that have a net worth of $1 million plus, or they have multiple investments, yada yada. Mm-hmm. That's what we know of. Mostly when you talk about real estate investment, that's where most people are pulling their funds, all the big names. The other side, which I think is like a huge opportunity, is your grandma's brother who is now newly widowed and he just got a life insurance policy, right? Or your next door neighbor has just been saving for years and he has 50 grand laying around, right? It's all of the people that are in arm's reach of you that just have anywhere between 25 to 100 grand or more, right? And you'll be surprised how many actually do, especially in today's economy. There's a lot of fear in digital currency. There's a lot of fear in investments. So people have cash on hand and they're holding it close, right? Now, with that being said, the opportunity that is in front of us, everybody in 6FF right now, is two things. When you can understand how to buy creatively with low interest rates, while coupling that with short-term rentals, you create a huge opportunity of cash flow where you can pay people interest on their money for coming and helping you buy this property, right? When I'm buying a house, let's go back to my very first deal that we talked about in this podcast. When I bought that $1 million home at 4.5% interest rate, I know going into this, because I know short-term rentals, that I'm going to cash flow 150 grand on that property annually, right? And with a
Cash
mortgage,
flow 150 grand.
right, gross, right, top line, yep.
Oh, okay, got
Those
it.
are the comps. Those are the comps, right? Anywhere between 120, 150 grand, okay?
Okay.
When I know the comps, I know the area, I know what's being done there as a short-term rental, and I'm confident that I can operate a good enough operation to get there, and I can lock it down at 4.5% interest rate. What I've done is I've created a huge gap in cash flow that I can leverage to then go get other people's money and cut them in the deal as partners. So now I'm going to my grandma, I'm going to my cousin's brother twice removed, and then I'm going to, my ex-girlfriend's mom, right? Each of them have 50 grand each. And I'm saying to them, you can be a part of $1 million property if you give me X amount of money, and I will give you in exchange equity in the property, as well as a cash flow, a preferred rate of return on your money monthly. And I can do that because, again, I creatively bought this property. I have a low interest, and because of that, I have low payments, and I know what I can cash flow on this, and I'm confident in my ability as an operator, as a short-term rental operator. And there's just a lot of cash flow there to cut people in the deal. So now I'm buying homes with literally none of my own money, but I am operating it and I own it, right? And I bought it with none of my own money. And this, I'm literally giving you guys away the secret sauce to my business. That's all I've been doing. And really, it's been incredible because I now at 31 years old. I know a lot of you are like, wow, you probably thought I was like 40 or something. You thought I was a lot older. At 31 years old.
I get the same feedback.
At 31 years old, I now own 40 plus properties across Utah and some in other states, right? And it's incredible. And I don't own them all free and clear. I have partners on pretty much 95% of them. However, the cash flow is there. I have equity in a huge portfolio. And on top of that, I'm feeding my management company, because who's managing these properties? We are.
Yeah.
Right? So.
Yep. So let's use some real numbers there. So you just mentioned like $150,000, and you told me before we got on here that you're doing like 8% preferred return on most of your deals.
Yep.
So 8% annually of $50,000 is $4,000. Divide that into 12 monthly payments. That's $333 of monthly payments. So $333. Interest only?
Correct. Interest only.
Yep. And then when you refinance or sell, or your exit strategy, then you're paying back that $50,000 that they originally had. Okay.
Correct.
So $333 times 3, let's just round it up. That's $1,000 per month. If you bought this property and your gross is going to be $150,000, after all expenses, let's say you're going to cash flow $2,500 per month. You just brought in 3 investors that are putting all the money in, and instead of you cash flowing $2,500 a month, you're cash flowing $1,500 a month, which, by the way, guys, still freaking good. And you own a portion of a property, plus you're getting all the tax advantages as well, and you have no money in this deal. Is that like a typical type of way to break down that?
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And by the way, I'm giving out most away, 40% of the property, 50 if I feel generous. And I can, because that's where the market is in the retail space of crowdfunding. Because as the investor, you're getting to partake of $1 million property that alternatively you couldn't even touch. You only had enough money barely for the furniture, if that. But then 2, you're getting mailbox money that's coming to you at a preferred rate that is really hard to compete with nowadays, right? And then second, it's leveraged against real estate, so it's a relatively safe investment.
Yeah.
Right? And so there's a lot of good for these people, and it's crazy, as I've mentioned before, with these creative deals coupled with short-term rentals, how much it makes sense for them, but also for me, right? Yeah. And the seller. Like, it's just everybody's winning. It's a win-win-win.
I love it. couple 6FF comments here. Tatiano says, "Teach me your ways," and Angel says, "Light bulb." Uh, I'm loving this, and Team Fearless out there listening to the recordings, like this is so far today one of my favorite podcasts, and we still have a little bit of time left to go. But I hope this has been light bulb moments for you too. Let's for a second here, Lame, sidestep because we're running out of time, and I know you have just some amazing stories. So, like,
Yeah.
what are maybe some doors to either opportunities or people or places or just things that you never thought would open that have opened for you in going down this route?
Yeah, it's funny. There's a saying in the sales industry that I grew up in. It's like your best salesman is your last customer, your last client that you made money,
That's
right?
good. That's good.
And for me, it's been just that. When you can make somebody money, it really is incredible how quickly that snowball effects take place, and then everybody's coming to you. I mean, in a short amount of time, Keaton Hoskins, he's the muscle. He's a local, he's a local guy here. Has a huge following. Some of you guys might know him as one of the Diesel brothers. He recently bought a property with me. He picked me up in
Wow.
a helicopter and brought me back to my house. He literally dropped me off in my house, like
No big deal.
just like in our neighborhood, because like helicopters are treated like vehicles, like you can park them anywhere.
Yeah.
And so
Did your neighbors come out? Like, what's going on? Is
oh yeah,
there?
everybody, yeah, I was the coolest guy in the neighborhood from that point on, right? So he dropped me off, and since then I've connected with just a lot of local people, and that's another piece of advice I give is, the doors open quickly when you start serving the people right in your back door, because everybody's connected. Everybody's connected. When you start serving directly the community that you're a part of, it's incredible how quickly your name becomes a household name to where people trust, people know that you do good business, people have multiple people telling them from different angles, hey, I know Lame, he did this. Hey, I know Lame, he did this for me. Right. And so that's just multiplied to where, I get asked now to speak at 2 or 3 events a month locally. I get asked occasionally internationally, nationally. But it's just been huge being able to service that. And to me, that's like the name of this game is really like you're just solving people's problems and serving. You're serving the community. It's ironic how much money I can make in doing this because it's such a win-win-win. I feel incredibly blessed because of the doors that have come, just because I do good business and I treat people good and I serve people in my community directly. So
Awesome, brother. Couple more questions, but I do want to know, you know, what do you feel like is next in this journey? Like you've accomplished so much since I met you 18 months ago. You were able to add on 50 arbitrage and co-hosting units right away. You now have purchased over 50 properties in such a short amount of time. Like you're doing big things that no one in their lifetime typically does, and you've done it in 18 months. So what is next for you?
yeah, I think for me, I'd like to really start getting into the commercial space. I think, I don't know if many of you have been keeping an eye on the commercial space. It's tanking right now.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's millions are made when there's a recession, right? And when there's, a hurt. And so I think I'm going to start moving into the commercial space, come here soon. But I also, I've gotten to a point where, me and my wife have decided that, money is no longer the goal. It's just time. And so at 35 years old, I'm going to kind of reassess and see where my life's at. Cause there is a point in time where enough is enough, and I'm still figuring out what that is.
Yeah.
But I would love to, my dream job is to be a high school football coach of my son's
Oh, how
team.
cool.
Right. And then just to not worry about money. And so that's kind of, I think, next steps for us is commercial. And then in 4 years, we'll reassess. But that's kind of the next steps for me.
Hey,
So,
kudos to you for being like self-aware about that too, because a lot of guys in the industry and know no fault to their own, and it's not even a fault. It's just the way that some people are wired. Some people just want to keep on accomplishing, and then other people get stuck thinking that that's also my dream when it's not, and then they're miserable because they're doing so much and they don't have balance in their life. So good for you for recognizing that and now working towards that. Brother, is there anything that I did not ask about in creative financing, or any stories that you have that you want to share or think is important for people to know?
I think in a nutshell, and I'll tell it this way. My first deal that was crowdfunded and sourced, that I bought creatively with other people's money, and I exited as a short-term rental. The seller was introduced to me by one of my best friends, and it was a long-term friend from him. The three people that came in on that investment, one was a guy that I had worked with years ago. Another was the mother of a lady that knew my mother-in-law. And then the third was a guy that I used to sell with competitively a few years ago. So another coworker.
Nice.
I found this property and I raised the money to execute it on it from people that were all within arm's reach of me, guys. Like, that's what's crazy about this is, like, I'm telling you, and granted, I have my sales background, this and that, but there are people in your circle right around you in arm's reach away that are connected to somebody or might be the direct connection that can help you accomplish what you need to accomplish. The number one reason I think people don't is because they're not loud enough about it. You're not loud enough about it. You're not telling enough people about it. You're not wearing it on your sleeve. You're not committed to it as much as you should be. And so I guess, the point of all that is, the life you want is not that far away.
Yeah.
It really isn't. You just got to take steps to do it. So,
well, and I know I didn't ask you directly this question, but just in hearing a lot of these stories, most of these properties that you're finding, you're not necessarily scouring Zillow or websites. They're kind of being brought to you because of these relationships and because of how loud you're being about it.
At this point now, yes.
Okay. Not in the beginning?
Not at the beginning. The beginning, I was just getting loud in my circles. Hey, I'm buying. Who do you know that has a property that hasn't been sold? Hey, I'm buying this property as an investment. Who wants to come on as a capital partner? Right. And just being prepared to, when I get that, to take action. Right. When somebody came to me, when my best friend came to me with, a friend of his that had the property for sale, it was knowing creative finance and being able to communicate that. And then when I was raising capital, having the pro formas, having the calculators, having everything to show the evidence of what I'm about to do is going to there's a highly likelihood because of what's being done currently. Right. And so yeah.
Good stuff, man. How can people get connected with you? Where can they find you?
My Instagram is the easiest way. Hailame K, HAILAMEK. And then I just love to hear from you all. I'm happy to help where I can. Don't be afraid to reach out on my DMs. So
awesome, brother. Hey, thank you so much for helping our audience to conquer the world of short-term rentals and creative financing today. You are awesome, brother. All right, guys, you have to get connected with Lame. And if any of this resonated with you, please do me a favor and go over to the YouTube channel, drop a comment on either what you would like to learn next about this strategy or what was the biggest aha moment for you, so that we can just know what resonated, right? Or what we can do to help out. So please go do that. And as always, make sure that you check out the show notes for this one on the YouTube channel. It's right down below in the description. If you're on the podcast, it's just right there on whatever podcast platform that you're using. So we're going to go ahead and log off for the day. Thank you for joining us here on the Fearless Investor Podcast, where we're helping you to conquer the world of short-term rentals. We'll see you next time, Team Fearless.